Good morning, Tal and Sarah. Good to see you both again. How are you guys doing?
I'm great. Good morning, Krista. It's nice to see you. Thanks for having us here.
Yes, feeling good. Thank you.
Awesome. You guys are both in the Pioneer Valley right now. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Northampton, Massachusetts, Connecticut River, nearby, mountains on either side.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm actually at Earthdance at the moment. So yes, Plainfield.
Cool, cool. And you guys will be, Tal, are you staying through until your workshop on site? Or
More or less, I will have a visit in Florida, family there in Miami, but yes, more or less.
yeah, cool. So you guys are both local at the moment. And yeah, you guys will be coming to Earth Dance to share your work, share your workshop in early March. Do you want
That's
to
right.
give the
March
full
4th to March 10th.
March 4th to March 10th? And is that part of the Cocoa Jam or that runs concurrent with the festival?
So we have March 4th, 3 days of form and imagination. And that's a training that um, that we're inviting people to take so that there will be a core group that will stay for the Coco Lab with that information.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or inspired by that information or could offer things that they learned or a blend of things that they're interested in. But we hope that they will inform each other nicely.
Okay. So the first 3 days is like intensive training with the two of you, and then you guys are also staying through the Cocoa Jam and continuing to work with people. Is that right?
Hosting it.
Yes.
You're hosting it. Okay. Cool. Just to give people a sense of, yeah, what that all might look like. And
I mean, hosting it, it's to encourage the group to curate itself with whatever will happen, but we'll connect the thread for whoever is staying on.
cool.
And maybe just to say, if it's not clear to everybody, that the Cocoa Jams are going to be co-created with the people that show up. So it's a maybe more than every jam. Not every jam at Earth Dance has quite as much opportunity for the participants to propose their own labs and classes and research and events that they want to make happen together. So we were just excited about the idea that I know personally, whenever I'm asked to offer something or when I'm coming up against the possibility of proposing an idea to collaborate with people on, it's really nice to have been in my own research for a while.
Mm,
So we were excited about the idea of holding a container for people to be inside of some of our proposals where they will most certainly come up with their own ideas and things will come up, questions, insights, things they might want to change or try differently. And so there might be some like fresh, fertile ideas for the Cocoa Jam after the few days we're going to have together.
awesome. And I know we just started Cocoa Jams last year, so I'll let people know. So we have our Earth Dance has our regular seasonal jams, so like the summer jam, winter jam, fall and spring jam, then gratitude jam at Thanksgiving. And then we started these Cocoa Jam, which is collaborative community. I think that's the Co and Co. And the idea that these are less structured, more open, and kind of co-created and kind of community led. And so that's what's going to be happening in March if people haven't ever checked out a Cocoa Jam. And then this one will have y'all kind of kicking it off and adding that other layer, which is really sweet.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would add that it seems to me from the last time that the cocoa jams are also less um, um, overwhelming in the sense that the numbers are not they're under 80
Right.
people or max perhaps 60. So that also creates slightly more intimate group for supporting the self-led curation.
Right.
Just slightly different tone than the bigger jams, I would say.
Definitely. It's a really good point. I know for some people, yeah, more intimacy and smaller group, getting to know people more. There's 140 people. It's kind of hard to get to know everyone in 5 days, 6 days. So
Exactly.
cool. Well, do you want to describe it more of what it is you'll be offering?
Sarah.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll say Tal and I both have a background, both with a long devotion to the practice of contact improvisation and also as performers. And uh, we're interested in bringing some of those sensibilities together in this 3-day training. So one thing that I've been curious about is allowing the practices, I'm enjoying talking about practical physical studies of contact improvisation. So the kinds of physical studies that would help you fall safely and share weight and change levels with ease, starting to let those actually just inform an artistic practice, like thinking about the form. Those practical physical studies are not um, the end, but the means to a practice that's about communication and it's about sharing ourselves and about meeting one another in the moment and composing something together, creating something that didn't exist before as we meet one another in our dancing. So we're envisioning some somatic practices. We're also envisioning some practical physical studies in contact improvisation, and then we're also planning to bring some compositional elements into the structure of each day where we'll witness each other, where we'll think and set the space up a little more performatively. And I think that we're both interested in there is this spectrum, like a jam is already in some ways performative. Even being alone in the studio, we can feel that as performative. So it's not like we need to set something up as a stage or like a proscenium in order to feel that we're raising the stakes on our sense of composing and awareness of the unfolding of the events of the dancing. But I think we're just doing that. We're interested in finding ways to raise the stakes on the composing, to witness each other, and to see. I notice that when even the idea of performance comes into a space or of being witnessed, something changes in my dancing. Like my nervous system changes, and something about the magical ease of choice making without performance in the space, without composing being an idea, like sometimes can just like think the magic can get lost. So I think I'm sort of curious about sort of going back and forth between being like the stakes are low and the stakes are a little bit higher, and the stakes are low and the stakes are a little bit higher, so that we can maybe build comfort in being witnessed. And also yeah, I'm sorry, I'm gonna just go on a little bit longer. We were talking about this idea of messy aesthetics when it was another word that a phrase that we were thinking about in the title, which now is form and imagination. But I think there's something really special about contact improvisation, that it needs mess. And so there's also something about appreciating messiness as an aesthetic value, um, and not trying to get rid of that as we start to get a sense of composing. Like it doesn't all of a sudden have to be pristine or perfect. Like that's part of what we're witnessing in this form. That's so beautiful. And just a, there's so much to say. I think that I've been thinking about uh, pause and relationship to time as being like such a big part of what it is to compose dancing, and to think compositionally in as we balance the, as Nancy Stark Smith would used to say, kinesthetic absorption with composition, as we like play between those two places. I think an awareness of how we're composing time is something that I'm excited to practice. I'm going to pause there, although I could say more. Go ahead, Tal.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, we could talk for a long time about this. I like that starting point. I think some of the things that we both appreciate have to do with the awareness of the uniqueness of a semi could say a semi performative state that arises in jam culture, and as in the inception of CI with "You come, we show you what we do" as a title for a performance that had it was riding that wave of, hey, we're going to do this anyway because we're showcasing our instincts, and there's something really unique about that. So you can come and witness it. And so that semi-performative state that some people may have experienced in a jam as people get tired and witness them, and that might elevate it in a way to give more information about what that is and how to massage this idea of visibility so that we can be more creative with the skills we learn, and have more choice making in the moment really makes the dance much more juicy, especially for people who go and experience jams a lot, but then ask themselves these questions of, wait, what else is here? What else is possible beyond just tracking or somatic satisfaction or kind of going with the flow of the dance.
Mhm.
And I think massaging visibility in a way of ownership where it's like, as Sarah was saying, both friendly environment as a practice of self-empowerment and self-love, but it's also got a little bit of an edge for people who are asking me about this workshop and they tell me, I don't want to perform. And then I tell them, you're not going to. There's no gong and stage, and you've prepped your performance. It's actually a little bit more in the world of sharing our dance so that these skills that we learned, um, the practices of of body intelligence that gets gained from CI practice with the floor, with others, with the world, where it gets put into motion, um, in a way that I think we can own it more and say, yeah, these are beautiful skills to share. And it takes a little bit of um, courage, I think, and vulnerability. And that mix I find exciting to bridge for people who love CI to kind of get a little bit more breath going as we share our dance. And I think it just is fun because it's fun to get more competent and confident in our movement and dance, and that's a game of perhaps permission and playfulness to say, yeah, I can do this. I don't just have to do contact, whatever that means for me. I can start expanding that or broaden that definition. Form and imagination. That's kind of, I mean, that's where it's at.
The title. Okay.
Yeah, and I think maybe if I could add just, I loved all of that, Tal. I've been thinking about musicality as something that um, has ourselves in it. Like there's something that we already know, um, that as we move, we're creating our own sense of musicality. Um, and it can be practiced, and it's also, there's something innate, there's something individual, there's something that each person has. And yeah, I've sort of just been thinking about what a gift it is to allow ourselves to be witnessed, um, in that. Um, even in a structure as simple as authentic movement, like what a gift it is to allow ourselves to be witnessed, um, being with ourselves. And then once we bring it into contact improvisation, and composing together, composing in space, what a gift it is to allow ourselves to be witnessed, being ourselves with someone else. Um, and I will also add, because we spoke a lot about contact, which I think will be the root of the of our 3 days prior to the Coco Jam. But we also will be doing some play with composition that's not rooted in contact improvisation, some group composition, and that can happen with or without physical touch, and starting to like heighten awareness of some other possibilities of how to move and play with other people in space that isn't just based on touch and sensation in that way.
There's a lot there. there's two things
So
that are
much.
arising for me. One is from your guys' description. The other one is from y'all, what y'all are talking about. One is about language and literacy and this tension. I feel that CI is, contact improvised, it's improvised, but there is a language, there is a literacy. So I wanted to ask if one or both of you wanted to speak to that, because I know you in your description talk about language, and it is this question of like, how do you both honor this improvisational spirit, but also acknowledge that there is certain language, there is certain, I don't want to call it technique so much, but I'm curious about language itself, right? And the language of CI. And the other thing that's really striking me is witnessing and being seen, because I'm just thinking about how in jam culture, it's very unique in that maybe half the time half people are dancing and half are sitting on the edges watching, and then you're in and out, right? So there is this constant both witnessing and being witnessed going on all the time, and there's a lot of social and relational dynamics going on in that as well. I know, like, you're aware of being seen, you're aware of people assessing your dance level, trying to figure out who they might want to dance with. There's that whole social jamming going on as well, that it sounds to me like what you guys are describing, there's some exploration of that as well. So I don't know if you guys want to, maybe one of you take language, one of you take witnessing, or you can both chime in on either, but I thought that might be a nice kind of symmetry.
I'll just chime in on a fun idea that is in the air from what you're describing, I think, which is, this idea that improvisation is already the case in life, right? Whether we are thinking that we're improvising or not, we're improvising. It's kind of
Right.
this idea of, we don't know that tomorrow will happen, yet we hope and expect that the sun will come or that things will unfold, and we need that sense of security alongside the excitement maybe of realizing that it is just floating right now. We are improvising this. And I think there's something to say about the semi-performability that you're of the jam culture that you're describing, the social dynamics and the we are actually being seen. We're visible, whether we pretend that we're not or that we are. I could, grow the beard to be really, really shaggy and not trim it with the trimmer and decide that, hey, this is for me. And I might have a little feeling that it doesn't matter but it is seen, and some people will have ideas about it, right? So um, I just think it's fun to highlight it in the way of freedom, or find pathways to relate that to freedom and excitement rather than to um, constriction of, oh, I'm being seen, but rather, I'm being seen. And maybe, yeah, that's why I say massage it, because I like taking the edge out of that by leaning into it. So that's just one idea that came up when you were highlighting this something that we don't often talk about, that yeah, it's social and we're being seen, and maybe it's fun, and maybe for some it's less fun, and maybe we're assessing and how to make that a little bit more um, of a friendly process rather than a scary process. I think that's something that I like to think about in that sense, and then interpret it into the daily life.
Can I ask literally how you personally have done that or do that, and also maybe in your teaching, like a story of how that has come about? As someone who's an introvert, and that is an edge for me, always like having to be seen, and I like even having my eyes closed a lot of the time if it's a slow.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, part of it is through just kind of being a little bit, bringing a little bit more humor to it, like mentioning to people, how when like if you're in the car and you have like a Mariah Carey song or something silly like Dream Lover or some kind of like poppy song, and then it's like doo, 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 and if you look over and there's another car, and in that other car somebody looks at you and they see you kind of doing something and they're looking at you and they're like, yeah, then you're both suddenly amplified. You're like, yeah, this is great. And of course, conversely, if the other person is like all serious, then you might get like, oh, let me not do anything here. I'm not dancing around.
Right.
And so the humor in me is, I think, in these friendly environments that we're in, where dance is very much the idea um, of the invite that we want to encourage, 99% of the people are actually in the space of go. I love it. I love what you're doing. Be more of yourself. And in that encouragement, I think that's definitely what I'm trying to bring when I'm looking at people or witnessing people. I think if we can remember that our dance is actually encouraged, we can then give that, we can do that to ourselves, like pre-approve our own dance, like be that own person in the car next to us that's like, go, this is amazing. You're good. People want you to be more of yourself. Um, so it's little games like that alongside slightly de-dramatizing the whole notion that being seen is related to me impressing anybody.
Mhm.
That's usually how I start relaying that sweet spot.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sarah.
I have so many thoughts. Just speaking to that last thing about like being an introvert, which I relate to. Um, I I think one thing that matters is, well, I like to talk about and think about um, jam spaces and contact improvisation and compositional practice um, as differentiating it as an artistic practice. Maybe it is social. I can't deny that there's a social reality to it, but I'll say that personally, I find it helpful and supportive to hold the perspective of it being artistic. And that matters because it means that um, somebody's expression that might be more introverted has as much value as somebody's expression that might be like super comfortable being like, everybody watch me. It's like both of those things have artistic
Mhm.
value and they're interesting. And one is not better than the other. And it also means that I'm also thinking about just in surviving jams and surviving being witnessed that like when I move towards somebody and they move away from me, that's a compositional experience. It doesn't have, like, if I can be like, that's a compositional experience,
Mm.
that gives me a lot more release and freedom to keep in the game rather than to say, oh, and then get into this like, oh, they didn't want to dance with me. Like, what's wrong with me? It's like, oh, I moved towards them, they moved away. That is an artistic expression. That is a compositionally interesting moment. And then maybe, I go to somebody else and it happens again. Who knows? But if I hold the yeah, it's like I can't deny that there is social reality happening and it parallels our social world and we can make parallels to the social world, but I find it more helpful to hold the artistic perspective um, because I don't know that the social um, mind really helps me that much in the dancing.
Right.
And um, so I think there's that sense of like everybody's uh, expression, everybody's musicality, the way that it shows up in you just naturally and as you shape it and as you play with it and experiment with it is valid. Um, and then I think I just want to jump to the language and literacy question because I think that one's really interesting too. Um, the first things that come to mind with that is, well, I think about falling and weight and safety. That's like the first thing that comes to mind is when we have a sense of comfort of going to the ground easily and of sharing weight with somebody without um, feeling a lot of fear about hurting ourselves, then it opens up a lot more freedom. Then we have more possibilities.
Mhm.
So that's where I sort of see the training come in. Is it's um, just and some pathways are useful. I think there's definitely controversy about teaching pathways in contact improvisation, and I feel both, I feel some of both sides of that controversy, but I think if nothing else, it's about really learning how to get yourself out, have some pathways that you can get yourself out of complicated situations easily, whether that's just like I know how to fall and crumble and roll, or I know how to like get my arms and legs out of the way. And then similarly, how to like go for things like offering and receiving weight. Um,
Mm.
but I think I also just wanted to say that I I was I can't remember quite where this came from. I know it was Danny Lepkoff that said in something that he wrote many years ago, um, that the form of contact improvisation is a synaptic architecture. Um, and I just love that so much. It's like to say that the form is not rolling across someone's back and then getting your pelvis under them and then following, that's not what it is. The form is how are we paying attention to a moment unfolding? So I think, and that also comes from like when contact improvisation was first being developed, these were people who already had really developed physical practices. They were already gymnasts and dancers and athletes. So I think there's something to be said for like someone needs to have a comfortability, and that's where some of this training comes in. It's like a comfortability, um, falling and sharing weight and kind of taking care of your own body in disorienting situations, and that's part of the training. But that isn't the form itself. The form itself is a willingness to go into places that we don't know how they're going to unfold and be with it and follow the unfolding and sort of experiment inside of that as we meet someone else in space. Um, so that can happen, um, as many of us have practiced in a finger to finger dance, which doesn't require um, very much falling or weight sharing literacy at all, but requires a synaptic like a mental and a kind of quality of attention that Danny Lepkoff calls synaptic architecture. Um, so I think that there's both. I just want to, I think it's a long answer to say I think there's both. I think there's use in the training of these practical physical studies, falling, weight sharing, pathways. And I also think it's important to remember that that's actually not what the thing is that we're really going for. Those are practices that will support us to open up possibilities.
Hmm. There's a lot there. I'm looking at the time. I will not open up a whole other can of worms, but I just keep there's just all these beautiful tensions, in all these interviews I've been doing with people, like just these tensions around CI is so much of what um for me interests me. And I think I at the beginning of the head I mentioned like form and chaos, and like there's something about let me put this. Well, when Sarah, when you were speaking, I was realizing I'm like, I don't know how much we speak about the martial arts roots, the Aikido roots with CI. When you talk about almost like that presence is the form, that it's like that is the practice in a lot of ways, right? It's actually in many ways it's a spiritual practice, or what all so I understand martial arts forms are actually centering around, which is not so much the form as what the form allows you to access, right? Sorry, I'm not sure where I'm going with all this, other than I've just have been having a lot of talks this week with folks around this intensive CI training we're planning for January, and just really kind of going back to like, why do we do this and what is it? Um, Todd, do you have something coming up?
As you said, there's like five different cans of
Yeah, I
worms,
know.
but maybe just that in this workshop, we'll definitely also bring up the like part of our intention and the joy of working together is to open up these conversations, not necessarily reaching definitive answers, but that kind of thought-provoking tension of inception of CI 50 years ago as choreographic research practice, not as necessarily it didn't the inception was not to start jam culture. The inception was not to start even a movement. Things happen, and that's the beauty. Oh, there's a language here. Language develops every decade. of super messy in the 70s and 80s, cleaner patterns in the 90s and 2000s. Now, internet and festival world for 20 years has changed everything in the way we communicate. And so, highlighting also, as we will, these different aspects so people can also feel into that there is no right or wrong here. If some people want to go all day messy vestibular system survival mode, that's just as valid as somebody wanting to use this practice to go 100% somatic, the slowest speed possible of, so I'm just saying good for noticing the tensions and good for highlighting them, because they're not to be resolved, they are to be brought up and worked with, and yeah, I'll definitely expose my sweet spot on that. And I think thinking of even where I'm at and my interest is already worthwhile.
Right.
I think I'll just maybe add that um, an interest of mine is of continuing to open up more possibilities for myself in my dancing. And I think sometimes that's about slowing down and going into this like very sensitive somatic space. And sometimes it's about ramping up and taking risks. And sometimes it's about studying weight sharing. And I think that, and sometimes it's about play and silliness and theatricality. And it's like I think as much as there are all of these different ways to practice, I also just wanted to bring in that like we can all practice all of them. And if there are ways that I still don't, there are things I still don't have access to in myself and in this dance practice, like those are the things that I want to study and practice, because that's when I get access to something I don't already have access to. And that's what's exciting to me.
Awesome. How about just as a transition towards an ending, I would invite y'all to comment on your relationship with each other and your work together and what you're excited about in working with each other, and then your relationship to Earthdance, where this is going to be happening. Because I know you both have a history that goes back a ways. I don't know about your own history between you, but I know, having lived there actually on and off at times with both of you on staff, I know you each have a rich relationship to this place.
I went to Earthdance for the first time in 2011, I believe. Um, and at that time, I was working as a professional dancer already. I'd studied dance um, and was a performer and had studied improvisation. And I was sort of hooked on improvisation, but I hadn't really studied contact, except that I was like inventing it myself with my friends. um, and which I think many people do. And I went to a jam at Earthdance and saw dances that I think from a just like a kinesthetic perspective, I was like, I need to learn this. Like just I just had that feeling like watching some really experienced dancers just like go at it for hours on end. I think the first time I went to Earthdance, I just really sat and watched like most of the time. Um, and so then I went back to Earthdance many times in a short amount of time after that. And I was living in New York City, and a few years later, I think I actually remember I got involved in the contact community in New York, and I remember I was at a underscore in New York City, and I was so tired that I laid on the floor for the entire 3 hours. And at the end of it, it was like harvest time at the end of the underscore, and I went over to my notebook and I was like, I have to leave New York City. And then I moved to Earthdance for I think about 8 months, and I worked as a volunteer, and I managed the garden, and that was a really really special time, and I learned a lot.
Mm.
Um, and I think yeah, Christos, you and I overlapped briefly during that time. That was in 2013
13?
or
Yeah.
14. And yeah, and then I co-organized with Aaron Brandes, an event called CI Ground Research for a number of years after that, which kept me coming back regularly in addition to the jams. Um, yeah, it's a really special place. The history there feels good to be a part of.
Thanks.
And you can maybe speak to your relationship with Earthdance and then anything you want to say about you and I knowing each other.
Yeah, well, I think on the basis of it, it's very we in the I mean we started what we danced together about a year ago, was it? During the end of the pandemic time, I think. Um, it was just a reminder for me of how powerful it is when you can dance with somebody that I felt like when I'm dancing with you, there's a lot of possibilities, um, both from dancing solo with each other, composing, and in the form. And I think it just kind of reminded me of, oh yeah, this is a rich thing because at the end of that pandemic, I haven't really danced in a while, or there was less opportunities and there was less meetings. And it was just that resparking of like, oh yeah, this is cool. Like this is a language that even if it's there and it is somewhere like a bicycle you haven't ridden, it kind of can wake up again, which was satisfying to me. And then Earthdance, yeah, it was as well, similar timeline. Here around '09, I came to do the Nancy workshop as I was a brash kind of, I'm still young, but younger, those younger, excited dancer that was saying, "Well, where's this start? It started. How did it start? I'm gonna go and find out." And I think that connection for me of earth dance and intelligent body research um, was made through the Nancy workshop, where a lot of history was talked about, and we went to visit the Contact Worley headquarters. And I think my brain was associating um, Earthdance to invest more of this intelligent investigative research um, rather than just the ambitious world of aesthetics in dance, and using dance to think about how to live life was something that was starting to
Mm.
really attract me. And I think also, of course, the woods, the saunas, the beautiful studios, there's something very alive here. So it's satisfying to offer it here and to be back here.
Mhm. I remember I was there for the Nancy's in 2009 on staff. We met.
Amazing.
All right. So much history here. Well, thank you both so much for taking this time to connect and talk about your work and what you guys are going to be offering. Again, it's March 4th to 10th this year, 2024 at Earthdance. You can go online and register and get more info.
Earthdance.net.
Earth.net. Correct.
And just to say, because I think we didn't say it before, you can register for only the 3-day training. You
Cool.
can also register for only the Coco Jam, and you can register for both. And there's something of a discount if you register for both. And we encourage you to register for both because I think it'll be an opportunity to really dive into the material and with us, and then see where it goes in collaboration with other people. But obviously, we'll be thrilled to see folks for
Yes.
one or the other also.
Yeah, and to add also for highlighting that or inviting that strongly is the joy of long form training. Like when you give yourself a week, it's not like 3 days and then 2 months later 3 days there, because the body can get a thread of practice.
Yeah.
And we've invited it this way that there's a bit more intense training and then a bit more loose offerings, so that the people who do both will enjoy that wave as well of a bit more rigorous work, and then also letting it go, but in a way that keeps the thread and digesting and offering for those who are perhaps wanting to offer and are nervous about it. This is a good chance to um, facilitate, offer something.
Awesome. All right, Sarah and Tal, thank you so much. And we'll see you at Earth Dance.
Thank you, Christos.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Go well, y'all. Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.